So we said these words: filtrate, filtration, the first process. We'll look at it a little bit more carefully now, but the basic idea is, again, what gets filtered out under pressure, right? It's literally being pushed out, pushed in between the gaps in little cells, are both good things and bad things. Water, salts, sugars, amino acids, those are the things that you need to keep inside of you within limits, right? But nitrogenous waste is something you want to get out. In our case, again, it's going to be urea that we talk about. Okay, so that filtration happens in a particular part of the kidney, and all of these parts, as well as the general kidney itself, they threaten to give you a diagram and ask you to label it. That's what annotate means, right? Is to label. So it's important, again, to get these vocab words here. If they ask you to annotate, they're not asking for an explanation or tell what the function of these parts are. They just want the labels. What labels? Well, here they make the list. Okay. Again, the whole set of tubes is called a nephron. The part of the circulatory system where stuff is getting squeezed out, filtered out, is called the glomerulus. So that's a part of a blood vessel, capillary, right? And then that first part of the nephron tube is called the Bowman's capsule. The next part of the tube is called that. The next part of the tube is called that. The next part is called that. And they might ask you to label all of those, okay? The last part of this tube system involves where several nephrons all funnel into one tube, and that one's name is collecting duct, okay? We're going to see this in a diagram in a second, okay? Ooh, it says let me draw, okay? So I'm not a great drawer, but we have, this is a little artery called an arteriole. Your blood's coming here, right? And then it branches into a whole bunch of little capillaries. This is the glomerulus, like a glob of little capillaries, okay? And then they're gonna converge back and become part of the arteriole that takes the blood away from the kidney where it gets filtered, okay? I should change my ink color, but I don't know how to do this. But the tube that we call the nephron starts with an expanded end that surrounds the glomerulus, the blood vessels, and then when the stuff gets squeezed out of these glomeruli, blood vessels, little tiny capillaries, when it gets squeezed out, the stuff we call filtrate, it crosses their walls, capillary walls, it crosses these walls, and the filtration here basically is just by size. This blood is pumping in here and causing pressure to push those things through the walls. If they're small enough, they get through. What doesn't get through, unless there's damage here, like if you get punched in the kidney, literally, right? If these things break, then blood cells might get into, and there might be blood in your urine, right? That's a definite indication of kidney damage. But basically what's small enough to get through here are, again, it was on the page before, water molecules, salt ions, glucose, amino acids, things like that, as well as maybe some other kind of chemicals that aren't really part of you. They're outside things that we might call toxins, things that you would get from cigarette smoke, pollution, medicines, right? These are good things and bad things, right? They don't have to all be bad things. So medicines that you take will show up in your urine. That's why urine tests can be given to see if any of those chemicals are in you. Okay, so now this part of the tubule is the part that's closest to the first part, the Bowman's capsule, if I didn't name that. This expanded part is called the Bowman's capsule, named after a guy. The part of the tube that's closest to it, proximal means closest. This tube is then going to curve around a lot, Convoluted is the name for that, and so that's why this first part is called the proximal convoluted tubule, right? It's going to convolute, and eventually, I'm going to run out of space here, it's going to take one big loop down deep into the kidney. This loop was named after a different guy. This is the loop of Henle, right? I realize now I'm probably drawing behind where my picture is, but I'm not going to redo it because I'm going to show it to you on the next page, okay? And then that loop of Henle is going to convolute again farther away from the glomerulus. Distal means farther away, right? And then it's going to eventually connect with, as well as others from other nephrons, into that tube called a collecting duct. So I should have probably just waited for this, right? So here you see, if we look at this one, right, we get the best picture of this. Here is where the blood's coming in a little arterial. It's then branching into a bunch of capillaries, right? These capillaries make up the glomerulus, and they are surrounded by the expanded end of the nephron tube. That's called the Bowman's capsule, right? It then convolutes around, bends around, closest to the Bowman's capsule, proximal, takes a big loop down deep into the kidney, right? Deep into the kidney. That loop is called, where is it? The loop of Henle, there it is, sorry. The loop of Henle, right? And then, after it makes that big loop, it loops around in little convolutions farther away from the glomerulus, so that's the distal convoluted tubule, right? And then empties into, as well as other ones that they cut off here, empties into that collecting duct, the last thing that was on your list to label. Okay. However, up there, if we went back to the last slide, you'd note also that they might give you a picture of a kidney because they ask you to be able to annotate a kidney itself. These are the parts they're looking at, even though they didn't label this. Even though they didn't list these are the parts that they could ask you. I guess they would because they didn't put these in a list, right? Here's a kind of a confusing word. Core kind of suggests it's deep, like the core of the earth, but in anatomy, cortex means it's the outer layers. The cerebral cortex of your brain is like the outer quarter inch of that part called the cerebrum. So renal is the kidney word, right? Neph is also a kidney-related word, and so is renal, right? So this is the renal cortex, the outer layer, right? All of these kind of represent a whole bunch, like literally 1 million in each kidney of these, right? This is where you'll find the glomeruli. This is where you'll find filtration happening. The loops of Henle are going to loop into the deeper parts of the kidney. That's going to be a key to how it works. The deeper part of an organ in general, and the kidney here specifically, is called the medulla, right? Outer part cortex, inner part medulla. And you'll see that we have a lot of tubes converging in the game plan here. In a much smaller sense, right? We had a whole bunch of these little microscopic nephrons converging into this one tube. Here we have tens of thousands of collecting ducts merging into smaller vessels, and then one big area called the renal pelvis, kind of like, your pelvis, so it's the same word, different idea here. And all of that funnels into that one tube that comes out of each kidney called the ureter. So here in the big picture you have one ureter from each kidney, leads to the bladder. I don't know if they would ask you to label that because they didn't make a list again, but that's that. And then the bladder has a single tube coming out of it that's called the urethra. So again, doesn't hurt to know those names because, again, they said annotate a kidney, but they didn't list the parts, and there's the parts. Okay, so this is a neat picture, all right? So this is always the case. Structure and function go hand in hand. The glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule have some structural aspects that help ultrafiltration. I'm not sure exactly what they would ask here, since that's kind of vague, but I think for sure what they are looking for, at least one thing they're looking for, is an increase in surface area, right? What's this filtration all about? It's about stuff crossing one surface and getting into and cross another surface from one tube, blood capillary, into another tube, nephron. In all cases, they have to cross surface. So the more surface there is, the better. And that's why you see what has evolved. These glomerulus capillaries are all branched, right? Branching increases surface area. And then the tubes are convoluted. That makes more surface where stuff can go in or out of these nephron tubes, the distal and proximal convoluted tubules in the loop of Henle. So certainly folding and branching to increase surface area is one thing they're looking for in this. Their ultrastructure facilitates ultrafiltration, lots of filtration. This is kind of neat. I threw this in. This is these cells won't be asked, but here's some neat diagram right here, and then actual color enhanced electron scanning electron micrograph. So this is kind of hard to make out what this is, but this would be like a capillary here, part of the glomerulus, right? This thing, and then this would be that kind of cell called a podocyte. And the wall of the Bowman's capsule has lots of these cells in it that have a tremendous amount of branching involved. Here you see some green ones. Those are purple. They made them different colors, I guess, to distinguish different cells, and none of them actually have a color. But look at all the branching you see, which again increases surface area. All these little branch extensions are touching capillaries, therefore increasing the chance of stuff passing. Filtration again.